Aoba. The internet is just jam-packed with a bunch of different information, and oftentimes these pieces of info can be compiled into a series of lists that make it digestible and easy for people to understand, but no list is more superficial, pretentious, stupid, and time-wasting, I believe, than the so-called best places to live or best cities to live. Specifically in the US, these lists are all over the place and they release a new one like every freaking year for some reason. I thought about making a video on this very topic for a while, but it wasn't until this recent story by the Kitsap Sun found its way into my feed that I figured it's basically destiny. It's about time I make my video on this and talk about how much of a crock of shit I think these lists are. The article in question basically celebrated more or less the fact that 4 Washington state cities made their way onto this prestigious list published by US News and World Report, and those 4 cities are in no particular order: Bellevue, Kirkland, Redmond, and Sammamish. Now, if you're from the local area, you might not be surprised that these cities ended up on the list. They're all affluent suburbs, and that's the whole point with these lists. They don't go any deeper than that. It's just a way to catalog and rank all the richest areas of any given local area in the United States. I mean, the best performing city on this list, which ranked number 11, Sammamish, has a median household income of $235,000 compared to the national average of just $79,500. That is richer by a factor of almost 3. Alright, so I wanted to do some statistical comparisons between these suburbs, because all the cities present on this list are all suburbs, right? I chose 5 cities out of the top 10, the top 3 plus 2 that were further down on the list, but still in the top 10, of course, to compare to their respective areas, and this is what I got. To start off, we have Johns Creek in Georgia, which is a suburb of Atlanta, right? Now, if we were to compare the median household income of the rest of Atlanta versus Johns Creek alone, you'd get $86,505 versus $160,185. This is as of 2023. These numbers are slightly out of date. Expect these numbers to have risen, but the disparity to have stayed relatively the same. This is per the US Census American Community Survey. I got it from a website called Census Reporter. Great website that catalogs all this information. If that's not enough for you, here comes Carmel, Indiana, which takes the number 2 spot. It's a suburb of Indianapolis. The median household income of Greater Indianapolis versus Carmel alone is $77,947, call it $78,000, versus $134,602, which means that Carmel is roughly 73% richer than the rest of Indianapolis. And I forgot to mention, Johns Creek, it clocks in at roughly 85% richer than the rest of Atlanta. So we got 85% and 73%. Quite a disparity, but if that's not enough, let's move on for more. Number 3 is Pearland, Texas, which is a suburb of Houston. The median household income of Greater Houston is $79,463 versus Pearland, $112,407. The disparity is a little less, but it's still there, 42% richer than the rest of Houston. Apex, North Carolina, which comes in at number 7. It's a suburb of Raleigh. Median household income of Greater Raleigh versus Apex alone is $96,096 versus $138,442, roughly 44% richer than the rest of Raleigh. Rochester Hills, Michigan, a suburb of Detroit, which comes in at number 9. The median household income of Greater Detroit versus Rochester Hills alone is $72,574 versus $119,054. Rochester Hills is roughly 64% richer than the rest of Detroit. Because we mentioned Sammamish, let's just compare Sammamish with the rest of Seattle. Median household income of Greater Seattle, $110,744. Sammamish, $227,273. Now again, this is from 2023. These numbers are 2 years outdated, but as I said before, expect the numbers themselves to have risen, but the disparities to have stayed largely the same, because those things really do not change overnight. Did I also mention that this would make Sammamish 105% or more than twice as rich than the rest of Seattle, and that's also factoring in the understanding that Seattle is already a very expensive place to live. Since it's expensive, you need more money to be able to live here and thus higher income. So the fact that these kinds of cities, especially Sammamish, are making this list already tells you about the kinds of cities that these lists deliberately choose to include versus what they leave out. Many of us ordinary citizens could not even imagine being able to live there because we simply cannot afford it. Because the only thing I can conclude from looking at all these stupid ass lists is that unless if you're living in a suburb that is affluent and has a median household income higher than the average of the area or the rest of the nation, then you're not living a good life. That's what this article is trying to tell you. I mean, what a big surprise, right? Richer areas are nicer places to live than other lower income and possibly socially, economically diverse areas that everyone else lives, the ordinary people live. I don't really think that this topic merits too much more attention, so I did not go as deep as I could have. Of course, though, I feel like my point still stands. Alright, these lists just do nothing more than to just showcase places that you can't really afford to move to, not in your wildest dreams. I'm sure the writer of this article, Andre Bayek, I'm sure he's a well-meaning guy. I'm sure he's a journalist who does a lot of great work on the side. It's confusing and perplexing to me why he would even spend time covering this, because I can tell it's not worth his time, nor anyone else's for that matter. That's all I have to say. That's my piece. See you in the next video, whenever the hell that'll be. In the United States, based off of